All right, everybody. Welcome to a very special edition. This is a joint collaboration with our guys over at Rotoviz, Colm Kelly. We got Shawn Siegele. It's, of course, the ship chasing quad draft here. We just can't quit drafting season. So a little afternoon delight for everyone. We have hopped in one of the final Fantasy Players Championship contests here. We got the draft board up. We got the 104 slot. How we doing, fellas?
Doing good. Looking forward to having a fun draft here.
And the argument for the fourth pick, we gotta get Pat on board with going Dalvin Cook and setting us up for Ronald Jones in round 11.
Look at the way he tried to grease the wheels there.
Yeah, I'll bring up Ronald Jones before round 11, Shawn. But
we just recorded a podcast. Pat might know the behind the scenes information on this one, where Shawn made a very good pitch for Dalvin Cook at that fourth spot. So, any arguments against that, or have you anything in mind at number 4?
My preference at number 4 is Alvin Kamara, but Pete and I have Alvin Kamara from the number 4 spot in our main event team. We also have him in other football guys team. So, if there's consensus around Cook over Kamara, I won't fight back too hard there. The contract situation scares me with Cook, and it looks like it's going to get resolved with Kamara. So I guess there's no concern there for you guys with how there's like a breakdown between him and the team over the course of the season.
Go for it,
I think
Shawn.
at this point, go Shawn.
I don't have any extra insight. It seems like with both of these guys, there's a little bit of frustration there. And I think that for me, it's that we also have Kamara in our main event. So with both of us having that main event exposure, is kind of fun to go in a little different direction.
Yeah, and that would be the reason for me to go Cook too, is that we have plenty of Kamara.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I was telling them how we have
15 seconds left.
all right, I'm going to draft us Dalvin Cook here.
I have it done already.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. I didn't want us to get timed out. That would be an epic timeout here early in the first round. But yeah, I was telling those guys earlier that we kind of, from this draft slot over the course of the offseason, basically broke ties based on wherever the current contract or injury status was, early on in the offseason. We didn't want to be stuck with a Dalvin Cook dead team there when we could have had Kamara. And as we get closer to the season, I think the Alvin Kamara, just a little bit of concern about maybe his back could also kind of offset maybe the Cook kind of question marks as well. So I still think it's really close.
Yeah, that's a good point on his back. I know John Paulson's also concerned about Cook's shoulder, potential reoccurrence of that injury. So they're pretty similar, both in the red flags and also the fact that they could be absolute workhorses with huge pass catching roles. So,
Shawn, did you see this this news for the Deandre Hopkins new contract?
Yeah, just seeing that, and I think exciting to think that he will be there. I've been more optimistic about him. We had to really fight Ben on this idea of drafting him even in the second round with the way this offense is going to break down. I'd be interested to hear what people think in terms of how that volume is going to be split, if the Cardinals are going to have enough total volume to create multiple wide receiver ones for this passing offense.
Yeah, he's one of the most polarizing players in fantasy right now, where I think you have really sharp people that are all over him and really sharp people that want nothing to do with him. So, interesting.
And to me, say if we were in a more wide receiver crazed landscape, and DeAndre Hopkins was going, at the end of the first round, after Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams, I think you could maybe make a case that you might be drafting him close to a ceiling. But when we see these running backs go in the second round and start to push DeAndre Hopkins to the back end of the second round, like we see over and over, to me, it's almost like all that risk there is baked in, the kind of macro trend stuff of him changing teams and all of that stuff. So I still see a lot of upside meat on the bone when you're getting him at the end of the second round.
And obviously there's concern when a player moves teams, especially at the wide receiver position. But like, I can't really see a situation where it's like his return on value is less than, you know, the 5th or 6th best wide receiver in the NFL. Like he's probably, like Michael Thomas is probably going to get there in volume, but as an actual wide receiver and a pass catcher, like Hopkins is probably the best wide receiver in the NFL, and to be getting him at that value seems kind of crazy. I think as well, we'll see maybe even in this draft, I think that contract will probably change people's minds, even though it probably shouldn't in redraft, but in Dynasty it will as well. But I think that the talent's there, and I think like Shawn's been very positive on this offense all offseason, and kind of the question I think he was leaning towards to see if we thought that Christian Kirk could also be a wide receiver one on this team. But like I think this offense is going to take a major jump forward in 2020, and I think part of the reason for that's going to be Hopkins.
Let's check in on a couple quick questions here from the chat. Is this a Football Guys Championship? Yep, it is. It's getting close to filling, so if you do want to play, definitely hop in there soon. We got our guy Harbs asking, do we have Shawn's official take on Ronald Jones after the Fournette pickup? I know the official take is within the update to the Zero RB candidates, but I'll let Shawn spill whatever he'd like here.
Yeah, so in the update, most of the guys that we're looking to target are players who have generated some positive news over the last week to 2 weeks and are now moving into that category where I feel a little more confident targeting them in the double-digit rounds. This year, maybe even a little bit trickier than usual, knowing who you want to target in that 11, 12, 13, 14 round range, because we're not getting the preseason games. We're not getting some of that. Jones was sort of the opposite situation, and it's interesting now you see the blurbs coming out about Fournette having a big role or a solid role in week 1. So we continue to see negative news, I think, for Ronald Jones. I was not as, I will say, gutsy as Pat in terms of taking our favorite guy in round 5, because Arians really seemed to target that, or show off that he wanted a different guy with the Vaughn selection, with them talking about how they really wanted Devontae Freeman if he would just sign a reasonable contract. This development with Fournette, disappointing, but maybe not out of the blue. I like Jones now at his new ADP. Certainly if he falls below even where he's going, then I think the situation is that he becomes a guy who now fits very well for 0 running back teams. I mentioned in the article that we have a couple of positive things. One, that Jones is good. 2, that Leonard Fournette is not a good NFL football player, and I think the Buccaneers are going to discover that. And then the other thing is that he's got a little bit of, say, a Royal Tenenbaum problem, where we'll see how long he can really go and continue to be someone his coaches and teammates are comfortable with in this new environment. So I think Jones becomes a real target here. But again, you have to know that the Buccaneers, in all likelihood, actually have Fournette now sort of as the guy they want to be the lead back weeks 4, 5, 6. My thought would be that Jones is going to take that back over once we head toward the fantasy playoffs, because he's simply the better guy.
Yeah, I watched the press conference that those blurbs were alluding to. Had to go to the source. And I would say they were both overly bearish for Jones and also maybe in a weird way underly bearish for him as well. Like the week 1 question, he was sort of pushing back. Arians was sort of pushing back on the idea that Fournette would have that big of a role. But he also mentioned like that until someone asked him about teams game planning for Fournette, and he goes, until his role really expands, I wouldn't imagine they'd really be game planning for him at all. They're just game planning for our run game, which, there's several hints throughout the press conference that, like Shawn's saying, they do envision that this guy will eventually take over from Jones. But we get a chance here with Jones' new ADP to bet on the talent at a price that doesn't reflect the upside that if Jones takes this job.
And that's why, in general, again, we talk about the price sensitivity and why those running backs in the 4th and 5th round, and as Jones had started to inch up there at points. Actually, let's regroup here and talk about this pick, as we have Julio, Eckler, and then who else just went? Kenyon Drake went as well. So we have some interesting options here. Does anyone want to toss out a name?
I'll toss out a name in that, and I don't know if you guys will be into this or not, but my preferred guy here is Andrews. I think he offers something that in terms of ceiling that Ertz doesn't, and that the wide receiver tier available in round 3 is so good that I don't mind kind of getting whoever the market leaves for us there. But I know there's a preference. There's arguments here for Hopkins. There's arguments here for Aaron Jones. I think given the latest news, there's even maybe arguments for James Conner. So I'm open to what you guys are thinking.
Yeah, those were the 3. Hopkins, Jones, and Andrews were the 3 that I had. We had a very similar conversation, Shawn, when we got to this point between Hopkins and Andrews in the main event draft.
So Aaron Jones goes. Go for it, Shawn.
Jones and Eckler are probably the 2 running backs that I would have been okay with here. And I think the interesting question for me is, would we have any interest? We've obviously done a hardcore 0 RB draft. We've done some single elite running back drafts. Would we have any interest in Jonathan Taylor coming back in round 3? And does that make any difference to who we would pick here?
I think it's Hopkins or Andrews probably, but we have 25 seconds left.
I'm not that interested in Taylor in round 3 because the wide receivers are so strong.
I definitely like the builds with the elite tight end the most. My vote would be Mark Andrews, knowing that there's a chance we could still get a Hopkins or Godwin coming back.
That sounds good.
I took the shot there on Andrews, just I thought that was the way we were leaning. So Andrews is off the board. I think that, like you're saying, getting that tight end, particularly in this format, makes sense at this point. You know, it kind of gives you freedom in those middle round ranges then of where you want to go to set that team up. So I'm happy with him there. When we're looking, I guess, at coming back now in round 3, who are some of the candidates you're looking for there? Because Hopkins obviously just went that next pick.
Shawn, why don't you talk through the Jonathan Taylor thing? Structurally, probably not a guy you've been drafting. Is that kind of just a portfolio thing of making sure you have a share of him, just knowing that he has that potential to be a league winner down the stretch?
Yeah, and you listen to some of the practice things that they're doing. They're throwing the ball to him, even though he is dropping some passes. They're throwing the ball to him, even though they have Hines, they have Mack there. If he catches any passes, I mean, he's on the way to having a monster season. Probably not quite like what Barkley did, but I think that we could look back on him and he would be the guy actually that might have been the sort of hidden or stealth first rounder. And in terms of the portfolio, I think he's an interesting guy. I don't have him a lot. You guys talked a little bit. I wrote an article for the site talking about how, especially in FFPC, with the way that the drafts tend to fall out, there is a way to go running back, or running back with an elite tight end mixed in there. And then you can still do some of your wide receiver strategy later on. Because of some of the drafts that I already have, it's interesting to me to attempt something like that, just to balance some things out. I mean, I'm not going to end up having 30, 40 leagues this year. And so within the ones that I'm doing, it's interesting to kind of look at that. Taylor's the guy that I have a ton in Dynasty. I think he's going to be huge. I agree with what Pat's saying, and that the wide receivers here are so good that to take sort of a big risk-taking move probably doesn't set us up with the top overall team, especially because there are some great running backs late, which obviously that's what zero running back is about.
Yeah, so it does look like, depending on what happens here, we might have our choice of a couple Bucks wide receivers. Kenny Galladay's always in this mix, and then it does sound also DJ Moore is a guy we've taken in this range. Colm, where are you leaning here?
I think, well, I'm not against the running back pick here if it was Taylor, but I think I would be leaning towards DJ Moore if he makes it to that point. I just think that the upside, we talked about it on the podcast we just recorded. I think that, you know, he's in for a massive season this year, and we've seen him break out, but I think he's going to take that step forward again. So we have that option now.
We are on the clock here. Ertz and Godwin go. So it looks like we're down to basically Evans, DJ Moore, and Jonathan Taylor as our options if someone wants to make a strong case.
DJ Moore would be my preferred pick here. This is looking pretty similar to our main event start with subbing in Cook for Kamara. But so it's definitely guys that we have already planted our flag on to some extent. But Moore, I do think, has a chance to take a huge step forward in a Panthers passing attack that I think could be a little bit revived under this new offensive regime.
Shawn, you want to go Moore or Taylor here?
Moore sounds like he's the guy, and really love him in this range. It was kind of fun. Pat had sort of alluded to the main events. I had shared our Rotoviz overtime main event with Pat and Pete. recently, and they immediately got back to me, showing me one of their earlier main events that was basically the identical team through 8 rounds. We had like one player that we were off, or we had taken the guy who I think probably will be the 4th round pick instead of DJ Chark. Then we would have had the exact same drafts and kind of looking forward to facing off 1-2 with maybe our crazy quarterback decisions or like kicker and defense there in week 16 of the main event for the overall title. But yeah, DJ Moore in this range with what the Panthers are going to do. I think that they're a team that has a very wide range of potential outcomes for 2020, maybe hamstrung a little bit by not having a preseason, not having some of the things we would normally have. But this Panthers team is going to be a lot of fun to follow this season.
Our pal Kevin is talking about a hypothetical 2v2 of Hopkins, Ertz versus Andrews Moore. I think you could definitely have that conversation. However, Ertz isn't guaranteed to come back. And that's what would have happened. And I think that's why Mark Andrews was the pick there, knowing that you could miss out on both of those tight ends if you don't grab one there. So I like the idea of taking your preferred one. And then because I think we all view, Hopkins, Godwin, Moore, even Evans, as kind of more of a similar tier, you just lock up that position. But do you guys have a thought on that 2v2 in a vacuum?
In a vacuum,
I would really like
I would do the same.
Ertz situation there, just with what Ertz volume looks like. I think he's a little bit sort of, for someone who's so good, he's a little bit undervalued in terms of a reality player, just the type of talent that he is. I think that efficiency has a chance to bounce back. You give him some efficiency that's a little bit closer to what we see from guys like Kelsey, Andrews, Kittle, and suddenly Ertz is someone where, you might have considered him at the 1-2 turn like we have with Ertz and Kittle.
Yeah, we have some interesting builds here to start. The team out of the one hole. I swear every time out of the one hole that the team can't resist grabbing the elite quarterback. I think psychologically it's like I get the best running back and I get the best quarterback. I see that so many times. Team 6 starts with 3 very nice running backs there, and Team 7 working on a true 0 RB build. So lots of interesting builds here in the mix.
You always speak too soon on these guys who go wide receiver heavy early, because he's coming back with like 5 straight running backs. I'm telling you.
We'll see. Maybe he pieced together some sleuthing, realized who he's competing against here, and just wanted to do a 0 RB tribute.
I'd like to see it.
There's another 3 running back start there. Shawn, did you do any other drafts over the weekend?
No, I was getting set up for this one. Curtis, Patrick, and I have a main event that we have coming up that we're preparing for. We're going to actually draft after the Thursday night game, which gives a little bit of variety. In these drafts before the Thursday night game, we obviously have the strategy that we have to consider with the options. And if we want to take some of those guys who could give us some options after that Thursday night game, you see some of the really crazy changes, and perhaps that presents some opportunities too. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, and that reminds me, just some housekeeping stuff for ship chasing. We will have our regular Wednesday night show. We'll do a live stream. We can talk some more waiver stuff. We're going to do kind of a portfolio review of the teams we've drafted. And then on Friday night, I received a DM from someone you guys might recognize on Twitter named Crack Rock. He is a high volume FFPC player, and he wanted to draft with Pat and I and do a live stream. So we're going to hop in a main event draft with him on Friday night. And he definitely approaches drafts much differently than us. So that'll be a very fun oil and water kind of situation as we navigate that. So that's the ship chasing schedule for the week. Let's see here. Someone's liking a team 12, depending on what they do here at the turn. This is a good question from David for people who aren't familiar with how the FFPC main events work. And for the ones you draft after, those points are bankable. So if Will Fuller, say, goes off for one of those 50-point games, Will Fuller could go as early as what? 104, 105 or something. Like if he goes for
50, he'll go like 105.
Yeah, so people will make very aggressive moves based on that. And Shawn, I know you and Blair in the team you guys drafted, you were kind of purposefully loading up on some of those Texans and Chiefs just for that very idea of knowing that you could start those bankable points.
We did. If McCole Hardman manages to see the field at all and get 2 or 3 targets, if he can take both of those 80 yards, then we're hoping to have Hardman, Fuller basically play none of our top 3 or 4 round picks in week 1. So we may have done a little bit too much of that, but we definitely had some of those guys. Colm, what do you think in terms of Will Fuller for this draft, and how high is he likely to go if he has just more of a normal game?
Well, I love Will Fuller. I've been no secret of that in terms of like when he can play, he's amazing. But the problem is, like you asked, where would he be after Thursday night football? It could depend on how his hamstrings hold up on Thursday night. You know, it could be as quick as that the season could be done. But I think that like with Hopkins moved on, obviously they've taken in Cobb and they've taken in Cook. I think he's clearly the number 1 wide receiver on this offense, and I'm very excited to see what he can do this year in particular, getting those extra targets. But the problem with him has always just been health. At his current ADP, I'm very happy to take him there. You know, we've looked at about the possibility of that kind of 5th-year breakout for him. He's kind of one of those players that you would almost think, because of the big games that he's had, that he has broken out a number of times. But the problem is that that's been done over a very limited game sample size. So if we get to the point here where we have an opportunity to draft him, I'm still very happy to take him. He's lined up on a high percentage of my dynasty roster, so it kind of tempers my expectations then for the redraft leagues as well to have too much exposure. But a player that I really like, and you mentioned McCole Hardman, like he's one of those players like a Tyreek Hill, that can have that upside, and Fuller definitely presents that, where those monster weeks are definitely something that we can factor in a couple of times this season.
Pat, I couldn't help but notice here up on the news feed and the Rotoviz Command Center, you check this out, Reagor shoulder looking good for week 2.
That's nice. I wanted to get Shawn and Colm your thoughts on this, because I saw Jeff Budoff had a post on Rotoviz about Reagor's shoulder. He seemed sort of like reluctantly kind of bullish on the situation. Like the takeaway I took was that Reagor as a person should probably get surgery, but he obviously won't do that. And so he'll play through it and he'll probably be okay. And maybe doesn't have a huge risk of like re-injuring himself. But I don't know. What were your takeaways on the Reagor shoulder?
I think so. And it was interesting last week that when Mike Clay was on the show, he was saying that he hadn't moved Reagor down that much, that in some ways, if you just got him at a better ADP now with the injury, you were better off because he had a similar projection and was going to cost less. And so I think with some of that information there, that it both tempers maybe the excitement around Desean Jackson, but also keeps Reagor in that range where if you believe in his talent, then he becomes a pretty exciting stash once he drops into those double-digit rounds.
Yeah, I'm excited about him there for sure.
Who are we thinking about here? We're next on the clock.
I don't want to say it. I think we were looking really good here, though. There's no bad options at this pick.
Yeah, and it also sets up pretty well for us on the wraparound to get another guy that I think we'll all be pretty excited about. Team 7, Pat, look.
I owe an apology to Team 7. Yeah. And to you,
it's looking good at Team 7 there with Calvin Ridley lining up now. I don't know. Obviously we're waiting to see. We don't want to get sniped here, but is it something that sounds like Mutton as a second name here for the guys they're targeting, or is it somebody completely different?
I still don't want to jinx it. I'm still so I don't see this guy never normally lasting this late. I feel like he's been going on like the 3-4 turn in a lot of spots here. I'm gonna make Chump run his clock down and make this pick before I say the words AJ Brown. And he took Terry McLaurin. So
all right, so it's AJ Brown for me.
It's AJ Brown for me. Shawn, Colm. It sounded like you maybe had another guy. Where are you guys at?
Well, I like Sutton as well, but I'm quite happy to take AJ Brown as well. Our draft's starting to look a little bit too much like the main event team, so I think I would be going for AJ Brown to shake it up a bit here.
The thing I've thought about that too, and it's like, it's because we're only playing in a couple of these leagues. I don't mind having bigger exposure, versus if I was in 20 and had 18 AJ Browns. But I'm okay with AJ Brown exposure here. Shawn, final tiebreaker, 20 seconds.
Yeah, he's the home run pick, and we're going to have some pretty awesome opportunities coming back around in round 5.
Yeah, I think. What was your guys' main event start? Because ours was similar too. I remember looking at the board.
I think our two starts were identical, except you guys had McLaurin, we had Chark, and when we were on the clock 5 seconds, Colm asked me to break the tie, and I went Chark there because I just think that he's someone who should be going in round 3. I think he's going to have just an absolutely monster season. But with as much Laviska Shenault as we have, that also brings in the question of, do you really want those guys in every single draft?
Yeah, I know that is tough. It's an interesting thing of thinking, can they both have breakout seasons? But I think at Laviska's ADP, it is possible for both of them to really exceed their price.
I think there's a good chance that one of those two guys that we're splitting between there. I would like to get Sutton on the way back. I would be interested in him at that point. But there's a couple of wide receivers that should still be available. I'm jumping to conclusions, but I assume we're looking in the wide receiver range here.
Sutton he's my most known player on Underdog. I just keep hammering Sutton. I think his ADP is absurd this year, so happy to take him if he comes back. I think DJ Chark is obviously a great pick if he comes back. And I think DK Metcalf is a pretty strong pick too. So there's a lot of options at wide receiver.
See my Rotoviz command center based off my email, pulling in my exposures here. Cortland Sutton, 100% of any teams I have associated with my FFPC account. So that's all you need to know.
Let's see if we continue that.
All right. Wow. Tyler Lockett, Le'Veon Bell. At this point, it seems pretty impossible for us to not get a wide receiver we like here. It's just which one it is.
It was a heavy wide receiver round that last round. I think there was only 5 picks non-wide receiver?
Yep.
3 picks.
That's early for me seeing. I haven't seen Darren Waller inch up that far in a while. There goes Chark.
Pete, how close are we to you taking shots if AMC keeps taking wide receivers?
It's Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. I have back-to-back streams after this. I mean, I'm drinking water. This is buttoned up, Pete. I mean, there's late night after hours, Pete, and then there's afternoon with the Rotoviz guys, Pete. I'm on the straight and narrow today.
All right, so that sounds like round 9 to me. Just a heads up to AMC.
All right, so Keenan Allen does go. Shawn, we were talking about Sutton. Who else would be in the mix for you here as well?
Well, I think we want to look at home run types of plays or just swing for the fences, win the whole contest kinds of guys. And so I think Sutton is that guy, but moving beyond him, Metcalf, someone, Ben had some really interesting stats for us when we were drafting our main event team in terms of Lockett versus Metcalf, but he still didn't really push me off of Metcalf as being the guy that I want there with how that could really blow up. Also think that, if you're looking to win the whole thing and you think that there, is any possibility that Kareem Hunt will actually end up being a top 5 running back at the end of the season, then he's probably the only running back that I think you could possibly consider here. But I think with the start, wide receiver would be my preference.
So it sounds Sutton does fall to us. Cam Akers goes here. I don't mind continuing to shove all the chips in on Sutton here. It sounds like that was who Colm wanted in the first round or in the 4th. So getting him to fall here seems like we're all on board with that.
Yep,
I am anyway.
Let's do it. I mean, these are the teams we love to build. Dalvin Cook, Mark Andrews, DJ Moore, AJ Brown, Cortland Sutton. That's a start.
Kevin had a question about Sutton.
This is the season where Sutton kind of moves into that Chris Godwin range, takes that next step. You look at how he's moving in his career, that arc there, what he did as a college player, his dominance physically, the way that offense is trending. You listen to the practice reports and his team can't cover him. I really think that the pieces that they've added are going to free him up as opposed to take volume away.
Me too. I think that's the big thing. It's one, providing cover for his ADP. If they didn't take those guys, he would not be falling to the 504. And also, I think it's ultimately going to be a good thing for his production because teams are not just going to be able to key on him and take him away as the sole focus of their defense. So the other thing is that the practice reports say he's operating as the clear alpha. And I think in this offense, he could just have a ridiculously high market share, like a true alpha wide receiver market share, as these rookies kind of come along. I think Jerry Jeudy's ultimately going to be a very good player, but this season, I think Sutton has the chance to operate as a true alpha.
Yeah, I swear I've seen this exact team before. Is this a replay? The goal is for us to, because we're quad managing all these teams, we do have to split the top prize, $500,000 four ways. So the goal is to have 4 teams at the top, and then we can just all split those 4 top prizes evenly. That's the goal. It is interesting, though, to that point of we've seen a decent amount of ADP shifts, based on kind of training camp and some recent news in the mid to later rounds, some pretty big jumps. But the fact that we're getting these same guys at the same ADP, I think honestly speaks to just the lack of information we've had this season. I feel like a lot of times these things can kind of get thrown in the washing machine, these ADPs based on some preseason games, and we just haven't had it. So it's been pretty stable for these guys, and I'm continually happy to draft guys like DJ Moore, AJ Brown, and Cortland Sutton in these ranges.
That's a great price on AJ Brown. That you don't really see that unless the ADP shifted in the last week or so. I think we got a deal on him.
Yeah, I've normally seen him going now at like the 3-4 turn in a lot of these. Someone in the chat was wondering if Team 12 might double tap Ridley and AJ Brown, a move we've done as well. But getting Mike Evans at the 4-1 is extremely nice too.
Very nice. Also, this AMC team setting up
go for 7.
They've got Julio and Ridley.
Let's see what they do here, Pat. Do you think they break the trend, or are they committed to the true zero RB build?
I think they're committed. I don't think we go running back. At this point, they've sold me.
You're
right?
Oh, Marquis.
Look at this. They're making Shawn blush over there.
There's always a team that one of the co-managers wants to jump off to and co-manage with someone else instead.
Yeah.
Shawn, is this that team for you? Are you going to approach Team 7?
Well, yeah, you look at the individual game upside on that one, and you could have a lot of touchdowns, Marquise Brown added to those other 4 guys. If Odell Beckham comes back, and he's not someone I'm drafting, but if he comes back and has the kind of season that we've seen from him in the past, look at that with Michael Thomas and Julio Jones. People suggesting that, and again, I know people are all over, and we love people drafting all formats, and certainly have no problem with people drafting running backs and pushing the wide receivers down to us. But in terms of safety, right? Are you going to draft a safer team than Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, Odell Beckham, Calvin Ridley, and then you have that breakout performance there from Marquise Brown? That's an awfully fun team right there. And I think one of the reasons why, if you can get Michael Thomas at the 7 spot, you're set up to have just a monster season.
Here's a quick question for you, Shawn. Someone, Kevin mentioned in the chat, Debo at 506. Obviously a big rise due to the kind of bullish reports on his availability for week 1. You, I know, have been aggressively drafting Debo even through the injury dip. What do you think his true ADP, true price should be right now? And my guess is you think it's probably closer to where this guy drafted him than where he was going.
Yeah, I was thinking that's a smart move. There's going to be some risk there, and maybe it doesn't play out for you as well early in the season. But when you start with those 3 running backs, you want to have I think you want to take some more risks. And one of the things that I see from people who draft a lot of running backs early is they tend to come back then with some of these veterans where they're wide receiver 2s. You know that they're probably going to play. They're going to have a target share that you can rely on, even though it's not that high. If you're going to go running back, get out there and take some risks. Get some wide receivers who could win you the league. You don't want to finish 6th. Right. There's no glory for that. And so I think taking Debo there, Marquise Brown, probably the better selection, but Debo has been undervalued during this entire draft process. And now not as much, because if he hadn't been hurt, then I think in that McLaurin Brown range is where he would be considered. So you're not getting much of a discount at this point, but he's been a player I have been drafting everywhere and expect to have a very good season.
I would also say if you were ever going to endorse a running back ×3 start, this might be that start with Kamara, Eckler, and Jonathan Taylor.
And they hit that elite tight end. So that's a good way to now create a team where, if they wanted to take 8 consecutive wide receivers, which is what I would do, I don't see that happen very often, but they're set up to do that.
Yeah, and the way this board's falling with Hunt, Mostert, Swift, we'll see obviously what pans out here over the next 6 or 7 picks, but certainly looks like a wide receiver we like is going to fall to us here in this range. Another lot of good options. I continue to like the the massive advantage you have when you get one of these first 4 picks, not only with getting the upside running back, but also just the way the board and the ADP has fallen, it really puts you in nice pockets of the draft where you're not having to make too many gross decisions, at least early on.
Colm, I know that we have talked before about the the quarterback situation and how you would really like to wait because there are so many good options. We waited and took Drew Brees in our main event. Is there a spot here, and we don't know yet because obviously we're a half round away, but we need to start preparing for round 6, round 7, round 8 if some of those guys fall. Is there a level where Kyler Murray and Deshaun Watson become interesting here?
See, I think this was around the point we started to talk about it in the main event draft, and then by the time these next kind of 5 or 6 picks happened, they were all gone. But I do think, in these next 2 picks, I would prefer to wait. But if you wanted to get somebody like Kyler Murray, I think it would make sense to, take a chance on it here. I personally would be waiting for that kind of range of quarterbacks that are kind of between the 10th and 12th round. What about you guys? Are you looking at this point to dive towards maybe a Kyler Murray if it makes it all the way back, or a Russell Wilson?
Go for it, Pat.
One thing I like to do here is there's some wide receivers that I really like in this range, and they're paired with quarterbacks who would then very likely be available in the 7th, or at least have a decent chance of being available in the 7th. There's even the possibility that we could go wide receiver and then try to pair it up in the 8th round. So depending on which wide receiver we go with, if we were to go with Diggs, for example. So I like taking the weapon first and then seeing what makes sense. Oh, Fuller just went, so that would make me less interested in Watson. But I kind of like doing that little one wide receiver one with the stacked with the quarterback.
We got Ryan Hodge in the chat. We are drafting out of the 4 slot right now. We're coming up here on our 6th round pick. One other benefit when we were talking about the elite tight end builds, not only for what it does for you structurally with your own team, but also you can sometimes see it instigate a tight end run here, where we talked about Waller in the 4th, which then all of a sudden pushes up guys like Hunter Henry and Evan Ingram a little bit, and once again kind of pushes down some players at position of interest to us. So I think that's just another kind of hidden value to getting that elite tight end early if other teams are wanting to prioritize that as well.
But I don't know about you guys, but obviously, Boyd would have been a target for me here at this point. Somebody you mentioned there, obviously, Buffalo with Diggs and Allen possibly. So Diggs, and Landry would probably be the other ones that would be there for me. The only other option, if you're looking for stacks, would probably be Christian Kirk and pairing him up then. So what's your thoughts as we get closer to this pick? Where are you looking, Pete?
Dobbins, I think, was going to be a little interesting there if he fell. I know Shawn's been on him. He also would be a slightly cheaper version of what we would have been hoping to accomplish with Jonathan Taylor. I want to play a little coy here. I like some of those names you mentioned. I think there's one other wide receiver with a stacking option too that is in play here that you didn't mention, Colm, but let's see how this shakes out over these next couple picks here.
You're up next.
All right, so Tyler Higbee goes. Shawn, real quick while we wait for this guy to pick, you got to be loving the 0 RB build with the Dobbins pick.
Yeah, that's the perfect setup. In the update that just came out to the list, talking about Dobbins, because basically the Jacksonville and then Tampa Bay situation had taken both Rojo and Fournette out of that top range. Dobbins had been sneaking back up into round 5. You pull up the FFPC redraft tool there and just look at the last 3 or 4 days. I think to get him back here in the middle of round 6, and it's just that team is falling perfectly for what they're trying to do.
Definitely. Yeah. Let's see here. Checking out the command center. Has the pick been placed yet? This person he drafts Antonio Gibson. So to me, Diggs and Gallup are both really good options here.
Agreed. I was going to float Gallup earlier. We hadn't mentioned him, but I like both guys.
Shawn, Colm, who do you prefer?
I think I'd probably lean to Diggs, but it's 50-50 really for me on either of those two guys.
Well, Diggs is one of my favorite guys, and I haven't actually gotten him much in redraft. I still have plenty in Dynasty. And the other thing, I just made a bold prediction that CeeDee Lamb was going to lead the Cowboys receivers in scoring this year. And so Gallup is an excellent player. He's at a great price. He's in a team that's going to score a ton of points. I don't think he can lose with that pick. I think that Diggs maybe is just more fun.
15 seconds.
Let's do Diggs. It sounds like
Diggs, yeah.
Consensus there. When we have this start too with Diggs to get 4 kind of unquestioned number 1 wide receivers on their team, some big target shares, massive kind of touchdown upside as well. So I really like Diggs as a wide receiver 4. I mean, that's kind of absurd to me.
Yeah, and I think there's a better chance, although it's low, that Gallup comes back. Did the FFPC Command Center agree with that?
Let's check out the probability.
He has a 21% chance. Yeah, he had a 21% chance to come back, and Diggs had a 12% chance. So low for both. But
so one thing, I know you had mentioned Landry, and Pat and I, we took Landry in our main event. He was a guy that we were kind of thinking of the different profiles. I know Shawn's written about, Boyd and Landry kind of being a cheaper version of Robert Woods. I definitely find myself gravitate, like if I had a DK Metcalf and a Cortland Sutton where I feel like the floor could fall out from underneath a couple of guys, I definitely like the idea of Landry and Boyd to bake in that target upside. But I feel like with these picks, we've kind of been able to have our cake and eat it too, as far as high target shares and, really upside explosive profiles as well, to where I'm comfortable passing on Landry when you're able to get guys like Diggs.
No, I would agree with that. I think the 4 guys we've got in particular, like you were talking about Sutton and the target share he might get, like they are clearly and by a long distance the wide receiver 1s in those offenses. So I think they should all have a minimum 20% target share in those offenses. And I think, like you're saying, that bakes in kind of the upside and the floor to it. So I still wouldn't be against taking Landry here when it comes back in. We'll see what happens. I know you don't want to talk too much about it, but the player that you mentioned in that selection with Diggs might be the one I would go for.
Yeah, well, I think we're definitely have some options here. Shawn, how do you feel about the Antonio Gibson rise? He's obviously shot up draft boards over the past week.
I always try to be careful on the price on players who maybe have a little bit of a questionable background in terms of overall production and length of time that they've developed that production. We look at some of these running backs who are coming out in this class who just have been really top players for such a long time against such elite competition that when we're talking about how they're going to transition to the NFL, there's always a difficulty, right? There's always a hurdle. We saw that with the class a couple years ago that Rojo belongs to, where some of those guys just didn't make the jump that we were expecting. But you can feel comfortable with that. I think Gibson is one of these guys, and you listen to the talk coming out of Washington, you listen to what Adrian Peterson said about him when he was released and why that happened. In the second half of round 6, I think that option there and what you're looking at in terms of risk reward makes it a lot more comfortable.
So Gallup does go 1 pick before us. We are on the clock here. It definitely seems like based on ADP, and it seems like you guys are high on Landry. Pat, is there anyone else you would toss into the conversation?
Kyler Murray.
I was going to mention that one of our sharpest guys, John Lipinski, our My Guys column came out recently. He has Christian Kirk. Kirk is always just ridiculously cheap. Do we want to try and go Murray and then get Kirk coming back around as opposed to paying for a different receiver here?
Yeah, that would be the goal for me, is that I think we have a realistic shot at getting Kirk on the way back. And so Murray, he's the type of guy we could go naked if we need to. We don't have to stack him with the rushing.
Colm, can we get you to break your late round QB for Murray?
Yeah, well, I've made the pick already, so it's. But I'll be honest, I was tempted when we were talking about the pick in the 6th round. I didn't think Murray would have got to where we got Diggs. So I was kind of dampering my expectations. So when he did make it back there, I thought it was a really smart one to go with him. So if you can get Murray, like even if you can get Russell Wilson, I would have been interested in that as well. But if you miss out on those guys, I think then I would be waiting. But I'm pretty happy to get Kyler there.
Yeah, this range is interesting because you'll see stuff like Dak Prescott in the mid-5th, like we have in this draft. We got him in our main event at the 6-12. So you see a pretty big range for these quarterbacks. And someone's going to get a really nice deal on Russell Wilson in this draft. So I think planning to take one of these quarterbacks in this range, but being flexible in who it is something that we've maybe like 2/3 of our team has a quarterback in roughly this range.
I'm going to run to my fridge and get a salad that I had made to eat at some point today. So don't worry, I will mute myself on mic when I'm chewing. But I just want to full disclosure, let everyone know what's going on right now. Okay. We're all right with this. I'll be right back.
We're good with it.
It's just it'll make us hungry. We'll be hungry now watching the meeting.
Shawn, this team 7, which is a true 0 running back team, it gets the high upside running back. If you were building this team, who would you be looking to select here?
It would be a little bit early, but he keeps creeping up. This is the spot where you might be nervous since you had those 5 wide receivers already. You might be nervous you're not going to get Moss. I think that even though Montgomery also looks to still be available here, I just think that even though one is entering the second year, you can make that big jump. One is entering his first year, and a season is going to be difficult for rookies. I think Moss is better. I think the Bills' offense is going to score more points. They're going to deliver him to the goal line more often. And then that injury with Montgomery, he just would have to slide a lot farther yet for me to be interested.
Me too. I have really no interest in Montgomery.
What do you guys think of when teams, the early double tap at tight end, like the Ertz Hawkinson, or even more so the Waller Higbee one, 4th and 6th round? Obviously, you're thinking of that guy as a flex. I always think those are interesting builds if you can hit on it, but you're also passing up on some really exciting wide receivers.
Yeah, Higbee is a very polarizing guy. So I think he's someone that I've been drafting in best ball, Pete, because I know I can't get you on him on these FFPC teams. But I know a lot of sharp people are off him. So I would also be curious about these specific 2 tight ends, because Waller is another polarizing guy where his target share, his moat for targets is pretty thin.
Waller's somebody I had been off until really the last couple of weeks, and selected him super early in this going deep draft that is both, a start like 13 players and tight end premium super flex. Actually started 2 QB, 2 tight end in that, and then drafted a ton of wide receivers after that. I think the developments with Bowden not being there, with the rookies really looking like they're going to be the guy at wide receiver, I think the Waller situation could be very similar to the Cortland Sutton situation, where it actually frees him up to have a second massive season.
Interesting. And where are you at on Higbee?
I don't think he's draftable at his ADP. He could have a very good season. I'm not down on him as a player. I'm not, and I'm in no way saying that people who draft him are going to lose there. But just in terms of price relative to what the target situation could be, Gerald Everett, a guy. One of the things that I like to do, and it certainly doesn't always work out, we're not saying that by any stretch, but when there are teams that I think are going to score a lot of points, and there are players where I like the talent situation for a variety of players on the team, I'm always kind of looking to see how inexpensively can I get exposure to that team, even if I end up losing because the guy who goes first was the guy who turned out to be the league winner, Julio Jones over a Calvin Ridley, a situation like that. I still prefer to have the second guy just because that frees me up for some other early round picks that if you take the guy, if you take Julio, if you take Higbee, then you can't draft the other players you would have there. So you're sort of willing to lose on that just to try and create the exposure in a different way.
I think as well with Higbee, like there's quite a few different mouths, to feed in that Rams offense, and even with Everett being the secondary tight end in that offense. Whereas if you look at Waller, as particularly there, as you mentioned, with the injury to Williams, I think it frees up a lot of opportunity for him. I think he was going to get a lot of targets anyway, but like you could make the case now that he's the number 1 target in that offense as a whole. So he could, start to put up wide receiver targets as the season goes along. So I think his value has increased a lot over the last 2 weeks.
What I think is interesting about Higbee is that you see a pretty big price differential between him in tight end premium and traditional just PPR leagues. And in these FFPC leagues, he's been very expensive typically, and someone that's been hard. Like, I don't even have a strong case to get Pete on him because he just goes too high. But in a lot of these, in Underdog and DraftKings Best Ball drafts, you'll see him fall pretty late at times, and he's sometimes going after guys like Hawkinson, to where I think Higbee ends up being a pretty big value given the upside that he flashed last season. So I think he's someone to keep in mind format with, and is always trying to be price sensitive.
I apologize, guys. Salad talk has overtaken the chat. Ryan's mad at me that I'm eating a salad. What kind of salad? It's just a chicken salad on some mixed greens, a little balsamic vinaigrette dressing. It is a big salad. When I eat by myself, I just eat right out of the mixing bowl. Don't even bother with any kind of more official presentation. And yes, I had to get a big salad. So now that we've cleared the decks on salad talk, back to your regularly scheduled draft programming.
You're not going to throw it to anyone or anything? You're just going to go back to your salad?
Shawn,
no questions?
what is your favorite salad to make on a nice warm summer day?
Well, that salad looks very good there. I did go through a stretch a couple of months ago where it was salad for dinner for 2 months, and that really took things in the right direction. And then the last couple of weeks, last night I had brownie with frosting that I had made across the top of that because the brownie itself wasn't enough. So I've kind of moved back in the direction of double dessert as opposed to the salad.
Well, I remember maybe it was a couple of years ago. I remember you saying that one of your routines was you would watch back all the game film while on the elliptical to kind of make up for the Sunday binge eating. Is that still part of the routine?
It is. The current situation makes it a little bit difficult to get the internet all the way to where the treadmill is, so it kind of bounces back and forth. My dream scenario would be to be walking on the treadmill, watching the 30-minute game playbacks while having a massive bowl of ice cream. So if I could do those three things simultaneously, that would be my preference.
Look at Team 7 here. I swear this draft is a love letter to Shawn.
It really is.
Grabs Phillip Lindsay there in the 8th. The kind of perfect zero RB complement to Dobbins with those wide receivers there. I have said before, like, we all talk about zero RB and then you watch and like no one actually does it other than, Rotoviz and ship chasing and drafts. But here we go. Whoever AMC is here with just a classic true zero RB draft. I really like it. And
they're two guys that I know Shawn will be delighted to have both of them. Lindsay was actually somebody I was going to take up as somebody maybe to target here if it got back to us, but really nice team lining up there so far for 7.
Yeah, very nice team. And I like the Deontay Johnson pick. I think he's someone that I struggle taking over guys like CeeDee Lamb in that range. Back when Rager was fully healthy, I preferred him. But at the same time, Johnson, I think, is someone that could have a massive season and not someone to be underexposed to either. So I kind of, even though he's not always my preference, I force myself to take him in this range often.
Shawn sounds smart as fuck talking about anything intellectual brownie frosting. There you go, Shawn. You made brownies talk like strategy, food strategy. Russell Wilson goes. All right, who did Chump take? Gesicki, so Kirk's the smash, right, guys?
It's a smash.
I think, unless Shawn changes his mind here, but I don't think there's any. What do you think, Shawn?
No, I mean, there's actually kind of an interesting tight end if you felt like Kirk would continue to fall, which, I mean, people just don't draft Kirk. But, in terms of what we have, Kirk is the perfect fit.
Yeah, I
think Kirk Van has a better chance to fall than Kirk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. Let's do it. When I mentioned Lindsay earlier, it was they were the two players I had in mind. There was Kirk and Lindsay, so I think there's a lot of similarity still continuing through this team from the other drafts, but it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, I love how late Kirk goes. It really opens up so many things where you can let Kyler fall to you around 7 and then just be, okay, I'll stack him with the guy who could explode this year. As one of the better prospects that people, I think if Kirk was a first-round pick, he looks like a better prospect than DJ Moore by a lot of the things that we look at.
And you have to take into consideration that he has struggled to stay healthy, and that it could potentially be something that is a problem going forward. At the same time, if he hadn't struggled with those injuries, we'd be talking about him as a 5th-round pick. And so you're getting such a discount on what his actual NFL production has been going into his 3rd season.
The other nice thing, we're talking about with DJ Chark's situation, talking about it with Kirk of, when you pass on Hopkins and Chark, it's kind of a nice tiebreaker knowing there's other pieces of those offense that you're really excited about. Whereas, if you pass on AJ Brown, there's no one else in that offense that you're excited to draft later to get exposure to. So it's kind of a nice hedge there and a good tiebreaker in some of those decision points, I think.
Really nice value on Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
Getting them in the late 8th. That's real nice.
Yep. This is a Football Guys Championship. Like we mentioned earlier, it does seem like it's close to selling out. Colm was worried if this thing was going to fill this afternoon, and I was like, don't worry. That people are going to get in there. Everyone wants to draft right now.
There was a lot of discussion back and forth, and my final email, I think, said never doubt Overzet. So Peter had full confidence this was filling.
You can doubt me about a lot of things, but I have been through this cycle of panicking about drafts filling. Like I was messaging Eric Balkman from the FFPC about some of our drafts because, you want to do these streams, you announce it, you don't want to reschedule. And what I've learned is just relax. They will fill. They will definitely fill.
I think they're down to, there's only I think we're nearly down to the double digits of spaces left. So if anyone is interested in jumping in, I think you need to act fast.
It's true. It's one of your last chances to draft the same team over and over like us and split $500,000.
Yeah, just draft the same guy, switch out the running back, and then just draft everyone the same.
I will say I've drafted Christian Kirk a lot this season, and it never gets old. I enjoy it every time.
Never gets old. All right, so we've been sniped on Noah Fant. I'm not saying we have to do it, but just so you know, this is when I would take Ronald Jones. Boston Scott's off the board. Philip Lindsay's off the board. Kerryon Johnson just got further diminished by this Adrian Peterson signing.
Shawn, let's hear your thoughts on what's available.
Well, I was really hoping Fant would come back to us there because then we would have multiple potential big-time tight ends. Yeah, I mean, Ronald Jones, someone I don't have much of in redraft, still have a ton of dynasty ownership there. Are there any wide receivers that we need to take here? We're obviously getting to where we're fairly well set, and we do have some late-round targets. We've had the tight end run. Any other tight ends beyond Fant?
I think Chris Herndon has a very high ceiling. He was awesome as a rookie. Last year was an absolute disaster, but he's had a very strong camp. They're starting Chris Hogan on the outside there in New York. I think he could be a nice pick here.
Did you give Pat the controls to the wheel column? Because I just looked and just saw Ronald Jones on our team. What happened there?
What?
We got down to inside 10 seconds left, and we started the tight end talk. So.
I didn't know that 10 seconds.
Colm, I will say, so the way the queue works is you can use the full amount because it will just auto draft the guy at the top of the queue if you let it run all the way down. So we do have a little extra time.
Colm, the true truth there.
I had nobody else left in the queue. I had nobody else left in the queue. To be honest, I was I think it like. I'm pretty happy to take him there. It's like, it's basically a 4-round drop based on the news over the last week. And, Leonard Fournette is not a good player. So there's a chance that it's going to be, a messed up season for him. But if we get in, like Shawn was saying earlier, to week 4, week 5, and he's leading the way for the Bucks, I won't be at all surprised. So
Colm, I think if you draft another team, just the two of us later on, just let me know.
See, my sense is that when this Ronald Jones news happened and when you decided to add a few more drafts, that what you were hoping for was to get more Ronald Jones with Pat here.
That's not what he was hoping for at all. He argued with me about how he's a 12th round value.
Pat treats Ronald Jones like I do Bitcoin, where I just buy a little bit each week, regardless of what the price is. Sometimes I'm buying the dip, sometimes it's going up. I just keep buying. I keep buying.
Yeah, that's true. I'm dollar cost averaging Rojo.
Fant was the player I was hoping to get there, but when he was gone, I think it makes sense at that point based on what's left on this round, unless we went wide receiver again.
Who did you guys do in your main? Did you guys get another tight end there before round 10 like we did with Hawkinson?
Only one tight end drafted.
Yeah.
We went with Mark Andrews and I stuck with Mark Andrews.
Yeah. It is nice to take a shot on those guys when they fall to a nice pocket. Hawkinson has definitely moved up. I mean, Pat, we took Hawkinson in what? He was the 9th or 10th?
8th round.
8th round. Okay.
He was our luxury pick in the 8th.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was I think an absolute steal in the 8th, and the early 2nd is probably where he should go in this tight end premium format. So I'd probably take Gallup over him, but that's right around where I think he's a value.
I would bet all of my Bitcoin that AMC is a Rotoviz subscriber.
I was going to say that earlier. I think he has to be, or else he's a rights for the site. They're the two options.
Is Blair in here under a pseudonym or something? Actually, there's way too many running backs for Blair.
Yeah, it's not Blair.
I think I might actually like their team more than our team at the minute.
Oh no!
Wow, here we go. Everybody's jumping ship. You're the one who selected Rojo Colm.
Yeah, I know. Come on, dude. That was a little early for Rojo.
Shawn, did you and Blair have any? What was like your biggest disagreement in your guys' main event?
We didn't really have any disagreements, and that may have been the problem. We should have taken J.K. Dobbins in the 6th round, and we should have taken Kerryon Johnson. That would have given us a little bit more protection against having Bryce Love as someone who factors so fully into our season-long strategy at this point. But it was a blast drafting with Blair. He anybody who doesn't know writes the wrong read column. Absolutely fantastic. He really is the foundation of so much of what we do. And drafting with him, we ended up with a lot of great wide receivers, big time tight. Well, we actually did one of the things that was the most fun about that draft is that we were not able to hit. We had the 12th pick. Kittle did not come back to us, which we felt was a mini disaster to start there, because then you really are not having anything that you want, since you know that Andrews and Ertz are not going to come back to you in round 3. We took Hawkinson and Fant together in the area here where they're going, and having those two guys at the turn at very good prices allowed us to have a situation where, best case scenario, we might have 2 big time tight ends scoring for us. But I really like the fact that when you have both of them, then I think that your chances of getting a guy who next year ends up being drafted in that 3rd, 4th round range is very high. If you only have one of them, then you're perhaps leaving your team pretty empty. You've got to use some more ammunition on tight end at some different places. I like having the potential league winners. I think one of those 2 guys is going to make the jump.
Someone asked about Jonnu, and I just want to mention that I had an article come out yesterday on tight ends, and I knew Herndon was going to pop in it because I had already written that part of it. But I was looking at Jonnu over the weekend, and once Delaney Walker was no longer playing, he was operating like a true kind of tight end 1 that we want to looking at the stat targets per route run. He really popped in that. And the thing that I think is especially interesting about Jonnu is that was true of the playoffs as well, where you saw AJ Brown drop off substantially in the amount they were going to him in that playoff run, but Jonnu did not. And so I think he's been kind of the last guy in this sort of the trendy sleeper tight end tier. And if he were to come back, I actually do think he's interesting. And after that, it gets pretty ugly at tight end to the point. Although Blake Jarwin is someone that's somewhat interesting as well, but I don't know if you guys are on him as much. So if we are going to go with another tight end, and Jonnu Smith just went, so never mind, he would have probably been the last guy.
We had this discussion a little bit when we drafted the 0 running back team out of the 12 spot a couple of weeks ago. How comfortable are you guys with going with only the single tight end and having that as another roster spot for running backs as we load up in the double-digit rounds?
I'm very comfortable with it. You know, the way Pat and I have framed it when we did say draft Hawkinson with Andrews is thinking of Andrews as another wide receiver essentially, and Hawkinson is the guy that you're starting at tight end. So if we are hammering wide receivers and we pass on that second tight end, you know, we're making a bet on Andrews, obviously, to be the guy there. And in those true zero RB builds, you want as many shots at those running backs as well. So I think how it opens you up for roster flexibility is really nice. And, you know, you guys have shown too with the best ball win rates that elite tight end does that as well, because it allows you to focus on other positions. And it might be one of the last kind of few things in fantasy that's still a little underappreciated with what it can do for your constructions.
And you can play waiver wire tight end in these leagues. We've done it. It's something that you can piece it together if Andrews gets dinged up, or I think he's very unlikely not to be productive. But, you know, let's say in worst case scenario, he just busts. I think we can figure out tight end on the waiver wire. So I think that's a good tactic to use.
Colm, we're wrapping back around here. Who are some of our top guys we might be looking at in round 10?
Garen, I think you
muted.
Oh. I was just going to say AMC's guaranteed to take one of them.
Yeah, I muted myself so we wouldn't know who he would take here. But no, I went out of the room and come back and didn't unmute myself. So I was actually telling you maybe 3 minutes ago that Johnny Smith had come off the board, but obviously nobody heard that either. I think like there's a couple of players here that are probably the ones that are going to interest me, but it doesn't sound like Kerryon Johnson's still in the mix for Pat. He was somebody we took around the spot in the main event draft. Obviously Peterson's signing there, but I would think of that as something a little bit similar to the situation with Ronald Jones, but you know, I'm open to a different opinion.
So
to me, it's Hardman right now.
I just put in Hardman and Slayton into our queue.
Those would be the two for me too.
Shawn?
I like both of those guys. Slayton is a guy that the Giants, I think, are fascinating because so many of our tools, like all of the receivers, in part because we haven't necessarily seen them all play together healthy. You know, with Evan Ingram, how is that going to work out? I know the practice reports have been very good for Sterling Shepard. I know they've been very good for Evan Ingram. You look at what Slayton did last year as a rookie who didn't have anything expected of him. You look at that athleticism that he has. I think that he could be a guy who takes a step forward like a DJ Chark, although it's very different in terms of just how much volume he's going to be expected to take on, you know, what the
like 5 seconds
is to carry the offense.
Yeah, I got Slayton. We're going to get Slayton here. I think that makes the most sense too, based on Hardman having a better chance of making it back to us as well.
I'm good with it.
Yeah, I think Slayton's pretty exciting. Very nice guy to have as your wide receiver 6 here. And depending on what these guys do, we might be able to just get both of them. Colm, are you on board with Darius Slayton there? Not that you have a choice after we.
It's already gone.
It's a revenge pick for the Rojo pick.
It was vetoed. No, like. It's just around this point, obviously, you know, trying to fill out those running back spots. But I know Shawn think, you know, getting those 6 minimum wide receivers, and we'll still be able to fill up on them a little bit later. But I don't know about how you feel. A bit like the Ronald Jones news, it hasn't changed my opinion a huge amount with Peterson signing with the Lions. Kerryon Johnson was somebody who we took in the main event draft. Are you guys both off him at this point?
I want a little bit more of a discount just because you're already looking at a split there with, with Swift, and I like Swift a lot as a prospect, and I like his chances to take over that backfield. So you're getting Kerryon in this range before. So if after the Peterson signing, and they do seem like they're actually going to use him a bit, I'd like to get him, you know, a round or two later.
That's fair.
Definitely makes sense. Let's see here. Breeze going to team 2, who got 3 tight ends. Man, I guess team 3 would have been a candidate to grab Noah Fant as their first tight end, but it seems like he was very close to falling to us there if Pennies didn't start his draft with 3 tight ends that early.
Yeah. What about Desean Jackson as an option that, I mean, I guess with Reagor coming back, looking like he might be there for week 2, that takes some of the luster off of Jackson, but he's a name we should probably float.
Yeah, Hardman does go. I mean, my thing with Jackson is like, I definitely get the appeal, like you just said, of like early season production. And for those teams that start with a bunch of running backs, if you're grabbing, Desean as one of your first couple to buy you time, with the wide receiver, which we've drafted, I just have a really hard time envisioning how he's ever going to sniff your starting lineup.
Especially later on in the season when we probably need this wide receiver to be emerging.
The 0 running back range has gotten kind of gross with the AP signing for Kerryon Johnson. Shawn, is anything jumping out to you here?
Well, I think that because we do have a couple of running backs, there's not as much of a need to have the early season protection that a Chris Thompson might bring. But he's someone where I think even as a pure pass catcher is going to score so many points relative to price that he's someone you always have to look at a little bit there. Damian Harris is interesting. Obviously, we had him in the early draft. It's a huge bummer that he is injured, and I think that knocks him down to where you would want a couple more round discount on him. Looking at what just happened, I'm disappointed that I didn't bring up Ebron. We had made a bold prediction about how big a role he was going to play on the teams, on the FFPC winning teams. I have a hard time with him going in the 10th round, even though I like him so much. The tight end premium pulls him up into that range that I think is a little bit uncomfortable. Jackson now off the board, but I think he is someone, like Pete said, right? I think he fits a lot better with a hardcore running back build than what we have going on.
What about the mentor here, Daryl Williams, or Jalen Reagor? It might be a little early for Reagor, depending on how you feel about that injury.
I'm updating
the clock, by the way.
Yeah, Shawn, we have 26 seconds here. I've put in Darrell Williams, Tevin Coleman into the queue. Anybody else? Someone make a case here.
I'm okay with Darrell Williams. Colm, who do you like?
No, I think I'd go Darrell Williams too. This is where we took DeAndre Washington in the last draft, but we'll take a shot here on Darrell.
All right, let's do Darrell. There we go.
Can you play the mentor highlight reel, Pete?
I haven't uploaded that one into the system. It's we're still a one highlight reel show, unfortunately, right now. Shawn, how have you been rethinking this Chiefs backfield after the DeAndre Washington release?
I think it's going to be interesting. I think that Darwin Thompson, despite maybe not getting the buzz, I think in part because so many people were burned on him last year and because the Chiefs just didn't seem to care for him. I mean, they had opportunities to play him last year and didn't go with it. I think the fact that they chose him makes him an interesting play really late. Also, Washington, if I understand correctly, signed to the practice squad, someone who may still factor into that. I think that Williams here, I like him. Certainly he was on the 0 running back update. I think this is perhaps a little bit early, but it's a little bit of an awkward range in terms of the picks if there's not that tight end that we wanted. I think he could end up being a trap play. At the same time, you look at that Chiefs offense and what the starter is going to do, what he himself did when he got a couple of starts last year, a couple of games where he was a heavy touch guy. And it's a lot better move than, I think, taking some of these committee backs who don't really have that same path to having the kind of big games that Williams has.
Yeah, it does seem like out of the gate, that Darrell Williams is going to have some nice standalone value and then also provide that contingent value too. If for some reason CH is a bust, I know no one wants to consider that an option, but that's still a possibility. And then of course, injuries and all the other kind of volatility that can hit. I like having a piece of that backfield for sure.
Or even if CH just isn't all that effective at the NFL level on the goal line, let's just say he's just not that great on the goal line as a rookie. I mean, that would be huge right there for Daryl Williams. So I agree, it's a little early here, but sometimes you fall into these pockets where there's not really anyone who jumps out.
Yeah. Pat, Tom is wondering, are you drinking beer, or was that like a seltzer?
No, but this has quickly become a tradition where I share what I'm drinking. This is a cherry lime LaCroix. Have not had that before. It's quite good.
There you go. Yeah, we're off the sauce this afternoon. Again, guys, it's 3 p.m. Eastern. Like, I love, our lives are very nice, being able to draft fantasy football teams, but our lives aren't so nice that we can just be drinking and drafting fantasy football teams at 3 p.m. in the afternoon.
On the Tuesday after holiday weekend. Okay.
Oh, man. No, I went to the gym today after a long weekend of drinking and eating, and I paid for it very dearly, every single drink. Colm, did you guys get a Labor Day weekend out there or no?
No, we don't celebrate it over here, but
it's such a bummer. It hasn't made its way over there.
Yeah, we kind of steal everything else from you guys, so a bit surprising that we haven't stolen that yet. But no, pretty slow weekend here this past weekend. So we get what we call is bank holidays. So it's basically like the banks are closed for one day, so we get like 8 of those a year. So that's our equivalent to like, Labor Day and the different 4th of July weekend. Ours are just like rubbish. They're just called bank holidays.
There you go.
Get the day off and not that rubbish.
We get the day off. We didn't get too creative when we were coming up with the names.
All right.
So it's coming back to us quickly here. I don't think we have any snipers. I feel like we can talk pretty freely. Obviously, Team 7 is drafting probably off of Shawn's draft plan, but maybe not watching live here. So who are you liking when it comes back to us here?
I'd like if AJ Dillon made it back to us.
That's a good one.
I like AJ Dillon. Shawn, are you reacting at all to the news that he's number 3 on the depth chart, or was that expected for you with Jamal Williams still there?
I don't think that's a big deal at this point in the season. I think especially where we're able to get him in drafts, we're looking at him being someone who's going to help after that first month. If he goes out and doesn't look good in his limited opportunities the first month of the season, that will start to raise some eyebrows. But when you look at the package that he brings to the table there, the size, athleticism, the production that he's had, he's definitely someone where if they have an injury to one of those guys, if Aaron Jones has any sort of trouble, then he moves into a situation where he can score a ton of points. I haven't been drafting him as much as I thought I was going to in redraft. I have a ton of him for Dynasty, where I do think he's going to move into a position where even if he doesn't catch a lot of passes, he's going to be very playable. I think he's got the talent to be someone where he was going in Dynasty that you needed to take him. I think here in redraft, I'm looking a little bit more for guys who maybe have a hybrid profile and are going to catch more passes for us early in the season. But he's also in this pocket for us in this particular draft where we could get him in round 12 and then still really like our 13th, 14th, 15th round picks.
Yeah, and I think sounds like we all like AJ Dillon here. I do think what's interesting about that pick, in conjunction with our other running back picks, is that does really, I would like to add, obviously Chris Thompson went, but a guy like Nyheim Hines, a guy like Darrington Evans, a guy that gives us a little higher pass catching floor that we don't quite have so far. So I'm definitely starting to kind of think of the type of profiles our running backs have here through 11 rounds.
Hines is so cheap, and I know Shawn loves Hines, and he's just a great guy for that type of role. So he'd be the dude I'd probably be eyeing on the next turn to fill in that standalone value, because Dillon provides just a real nice ceiling play here, which I think the team could still use a bit of.
Yeah. And when you have the anchor with Dalvin Cook, Colm, did he go?
No. I was just going to say about the depth charts. Like, obviously, when you have no preseason games and you don't have any of that to buy into to see like how these depth charts are getting shaken out, I think like at this point the depth charts aren't really worth that amount. Like if the guy's on the roster and there's like 3 running backs, like after 2 weeks those depth charts could be flipped on their head from what we see at the moment, unless it's somebody with an established job. So whether Williams is second in the depth chart or Dillon, I think that's kind of it's just written on paper at the moment.
It could just be veteran deference to Williams as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think it might have been the Ravens were saying that it's basically the media team that have put together the depth charts for them. So like it's basically like you're saying, they know that name over the rookie's name, so we'll just put him there on the depth chart.
I wanted to throw out here, we're going to if we end up with one quarterback, one tight end, and we end up with sort of 8 and 8 for wide receivers and running backs, we take a couple more wide receivers, 3 names that I really like, and we kind of have to factor in where they'll go as we take our running backs here. Harry, Ayuk, and then obviously Shenault. How do those guys look in terms of, number one, wanting them on our roster, and then number 2, where you think we would need to take them, how that fits in with the running backs?
I think we'd have to take probably Visca here at the 13th, and I would also throw in Rager there. I think Rager and Ayuk are similar plays in that we're unsure about their week 1 status, but I think Rager has a much higher ceiling for the season in terms of his target market share if he ends up being relatively healthy.
I think he went.
Did he go? Oh, I missed that if he did. Oh, he did go. Okay. All right. Then, yeah, those are the same guys for me.
But we're good to draft Dylan here, right?
Well, I think Sean's saying if we want 2 of those guys, we have to take one of them here.
If we do, yeah. I'm okay splitting it and going Dylan here and then getting a wide receiver coming back, knowing we might miss out on all 3 of those targets coming back.
I'm good with that too.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get Dylan here, and then we can kind of pick our flavor at wide receiver coming back, although I know what the chat wants.
It's a dangerous thing. Once we get to the 13th.
Yeah. How dare Shawn even ask how much do we want Shenault?
No, that's not how much do we want him. Where do we have to fit him in there? We know that he's got to be on every single team. It's good to get a Green Bay Packer. For those of you who don't know, Colm, the Packers are his adoptive team there in Ireland.
There we go. We're getting lots of, back in a former life, I was a Broncos fan, grew up in Denver, got Cortland Sutton. Pat has pledged a lifelong allegiance to Ronald Jones. He gets him. Shawn, of course, the Arizona Cardinals guy with Kirk and Murray. I think we're dishing it all out a little bit for all of us.
Yep, I'm usually drafting my Chiefs outfit, but today I do have the Cardinals going here. So it's nice to get that Murray Kirk.
It's all planned out.
Double.
All right, so Ayuk goes. This is a little bit of a sweat, I have to say. We've got Harry here still as cover. Although you guys might just prefer Harry, but this is the point of the draft where we're starting to sweat it out on our boy.
Yeah, actually, Shawn, let's give us your. You won't offend us or the chat. Your breakdown on Harry versus Shenault in a vacuum.
I actually think I do like Shenault a little bit more. It's more of a price issue where, which guy is rising the fastest, because we know now with Fournette gone, the thing that there's so many fascinating things to track with Shenault. He's got, these Julio comps, if he can show off that athleticism to make these long plays. He's also got this weird, running back element to him where he could get a ton of carries this season. He could get goal line carries. And so when you're really looking at him as a home run pick, it's never made any sense what his ADP is. And so, if you have to reach based on ADP, then you feel comfortable doing that, since he should be going in the top 50 rounds.
I don't know who's up next.
So who do you guys, the other guy here that's pretty interesting to me is Robbie Anderson. Would love to get Robbie Anderson on a team right now.
It's a good call, Pete. I think that might be the play.
If DJ Moore were to get hurt, Robbie's kind of a nice handcuff on him. You guys are sure you want to go this rookie? I heard rookies might start slow in a COVID year.
It is a COVID year. I don't know.
Okay, the chat is literally just getting absolutely restless about this. Okay, all right. Let's just make sure. Make sure I'm pressing the right button. Let's make sure it populates on the screen, that there was no clerical errors there. Okay, we did just, in fact, draft Laviska Shenault.
So good.
It does feel like, though, I was just like, if it got to this stage and then we didn't get him, if he was sniped just before us, I think the listenership, the podcast would have just been turned off. The stream would have ended. Yeah.
We've created a monster. They did, like last night I did a show, and we didn't get LaVisca, and the chat was just absolutely devastated. Oh, Shawn, I mentioned this to you when we were talking on the Overtime podcast. Here's my signed LaVisca Chenault mini helmet.
That is very nice. Very nice. Is
I
there a
to go
story
along.
for that?
What's that, Shawn?
Is there a story for that?
It was just, I saw it was a fantasy podcast, Club Fantasy. They were doing a charity drive, and they had a few items up for raffle. And one of them was a LaVisca Chenault mini helmet. And every time you did like a $15 donation, you got your name in the thing. And so just to be sure, I think I donated like $120 to make sure I got the helmet.
I was wondering if you would spend more money on the main events or more money on the LaVisca Chenault helmet.
Yeah, it's getting close. It's getting close. Let's see here. Checking in on the chat. I did forget. Sorry, the clip ends with LaVisca Chenault telling all the doubters to be quiet. People will go up to Pete in the street in 20 years and ask him to play the clip. Pete will lash out. Oh, there we go. There we go. Our first defense off the board here. Shawn, with the Damian Harris injury, it is starting to point, and the Lamar Miller release, it does look like Sony Michel is going to get the majority of those touches week one. Is he at all interesting to you in this range, or is Harris still just the more exciting play with the discount?
Yeah, it's so tricky here. I have some Michel late. I've seen him go, around 18, 19, 20, because he just has that profile. He's a little bit like a Leonard Fournette who doesn't catch passes, where, he's got that role, but hasn't been able to show that he actually is a good NFL player. The dagger there with Darrington Evans going. I wanted to ask Pat, because he made such a convincing case for Harris when we were on the show last. How much does Michel coming back and having decent practice reports combined with this Harris injury, does that take him completely off the board for us, and for drafters kind of in this range?
Yeah, again, I think it comes down to that discount, and where do we take Harris? It's something like the 11th round, right? It wasn't all that early. And so at that price point, with Michel not back and Harris, I think he has a hand injury, right? So he's now unlikely to play week one. All of those are real concerns. And so you're getting like a round discount. And so if anything, it feels like the hype has pushed him up to where maybe he doesn't really deserve to be there now. But if he were to fall to like the late 13th, 14th range, basically swap here with Michel and maybe get a little bit more of a discount, then I do think he's still fairly interesting, because he was getting that pass catching work, where Michel has really shown that he's not going to be used that way whatsoever. So that gives Harris a couple different paths to be relevant.
Does the move to Newton as opposed to Brady, is that something that's a dagger for James White? And should we look at maybe a different player as a potential to catch some passes, or is that sort of irrelevant?
I'm not sure, because that was one of the arguments against Christian McCaffrey when he went to Carolina, is that, he wasn't going to catch many passes, and obviously Newton supported him more than fine. So I think given the state of the pass catching core in New England, that White should be pretty heavily involved, regardless of Newton being there instead of Brady.
Yeah, part of what was appealing to me about Harris was kind of the idea that he could run away with the job there. Sony Michel was even rumored to be opening up on PUP. The reports of him catching those passes, it seemed like very nice at the time, but then things have very quickly changed, and you do worry about, is he talented enough to come back in and wrestle away work from Sony, wrestle away catches from James White, all after coming in after the injury. Damn it, Nyheim Hines goes there.
To AMC.
AMC guaranteed Rotoviz subscriber. That's a lock. So to me here, if we want to add a running back, it's probably Bryce Love, or we take the falling N'Keal Harry. I don't know if we feel like that's gilding the lily there, our 8th wide receiver, considering our running backs. What do you guys think?
I think we killed him.
Hardy went there in the last
Oh,
pick.
he just went.
Oh, he did. Okay.
All right. Then I think we go Bryce Love.
Shawn, that your guy?
It is. He's maybe my version of Pat's Rojo there in terms of feeling like the situation and some of the. So with Love, we've had that interesting dynamic where the news was very good, and then the reports were he wasn't going to make the team. Now with Adrian Peterson not being there, obviously that vaults Gibson just up into that really elite range. And Peterson spoke very glowingly of him, but he also noted that Love and the health that he has been demonstrating, the ability he's been demonstrating, and what he maybe is in a month, right? So again, once we're in round 14 here, we can look a couple of weeks down the line. If we're really looking at this team as being Antonio Gibson and Bryce Love, and I think that while those other guys may play a little bit of a role, the fact that they just released Peterson, I think suggests that it really is going to be Gibson and Love. Otherwise, just keep the better early down back, right? And so Love really isn't that far away now from having a role that could be pretty exciting. I say that with the understanding that we have so little real information on this. We could be completely wrong, but I think in round 14, it makes sense to kind of take that risk.
And you're getting to bet against Peyton Barber, which was a fair amount of my Rojo thesis last year. So it is really your Rojo.
I will say, as we kind of, I'm reacting in real time to this board and kind of getting sniped on some of these guys like Evans and Hines and even Joshua Kelly as well. I'm feeling what we normally feel when we do our main event draft, where these running back candidates we like, the ADPs just start to really shoot up. And the guys we were just gobbling up a month ago, just 14, 15, 16, 17, I started to feel like it's drying up quicker. Like I just feel the sand underneath our feet kind of evaporating in a way I didn't before.
And Benny Snell's on waivers in our main event, the one we did first. There's, a lot of these guys.
That draft we did, Shawn, we took him in the 16th round. So that's only, what was that, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
The most exciting and also the most disappointing thing in terms of news this sort of training camp time period has been Benny Snell. It's been so great to hear that he is the back, or in practice has been someone similar to what I thought he might be. It's been devastating for his ADP because when you could get him in the 19th round every draft, that was absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Yep. So what are we looking at here, guys? I mean, I'm looking at the board and I don't know if there's anyone I'm going to go to the mat for. I'm pretty open.
I think my preferred guy is Zigbo. We don't know. Obviously, Robinson listed as a starter there, but that is like the definition of an ambiguous backfield. I don't even know if they know what they're going to do. And so I think he has some real potential to emerge. And we don't really know his talent level. He looks okay as a prospect. He doesn't look fantastic, but he's a bigger guy. Could, I guess, maybe we've bet against him a little bit by taking Visca and hoping there for those touchdowns, but not totally.
Well, and also just to mention, I assume James Robinson is still available. Is there? He did go? Okay. Yeah. Never mind. Shawn, Colm, thoughts on Zigbo?
I don't really mind it. It's just I was interested to see what your thoughts were on. We kind of touched on it earlier about a second quarterback. I know on this show that we did just before we recorded this, Shawn had some kind of thoughts on Jimmy Garoppolo. So I was just wondering, at this point, with him still available, is that a road that we take, or do you want to keep going?
The other question I had too is there any sort of with some of our running back targets gone? Do we have any thoughts on defenses and kickers that we might want to take early? Do we have any thoughts on how we can play in sort of a very inexpensive fashion that Thursday night game, giving us some optionality?
Yeah, so Harrison Butker does go. So, Shawn, would you be pointing with the Thursday night angle with looking at the Chiefs defense?
Maybe a little bit later still for them. It's probably an extreme long shot that Thompson would get in there and score some running back points. So, and if we want to do that, we probably want to do it at the very end.
All right, 15 seconds. Right now, Zigbo's in the queue, but anyone can win out here with a name if they like one. Just toss it out.
I have no strong argument against it, really.
All right, I guess it's Zigbo.
By default.
The least enthusiasm for a draft pick of all time.
Wow.
Which, I mean, I get it. It's a Siegele.
I have because now I feel a little snake bitten. I'm going to head to the private chat with a running back I would be interested in later. So I'll float this here just in case we can get it on the radar and start discussion a little earlier next time.
I was going to mention Brian Hill as an alternative to a Siegele, and then of course he went the pick before, but he's someone that is sort of the Snell in Atlanta. Really seems to have locked up that number 2 role and has impressed them beyond what he did last year.
All right.
Oh, yeah, I do like that, Pete.
Let's see here. But yeah, to Shawn's point, like even the guy I mentioned, I think is still going to be fairly cheap. So I don't mind coming back here in the 16th, 17th, prioritizing. I think there's a couple upside tight ends that I also wouldn't mind taking a peek at. But yeah.
One of the things too with the Siegele there, I think is kind of interesting, just to throw sort of a plug in for the Rotoviz FFPC waivers tool. He went for well over 100 in quite a few of the FPC leagues that have that early Friday waivers period. Now that was before the depth chart news came out, which probably doesn't matter. I'm a little bit more excited about the fact that Robinson is generating, great practice reviews, both from coaches, reporters, and we mentioned him right after the combine. Both he and Evans in the pre-draft, and obviously the draft position plays the major role. It's the reason why Edwards-Helaire is in the first round. These other guys are not. But before that draft position gets factored in, Evans and James Robinson had the same score as Edwards-Helaire there. So those things were things I really liked about Robinson and reasons why I think he's justifiably going well ahead of a Siegele. But when you can get someone in round 15 who was actually a pretty decent bid amount in that first waivers period, I think that's a good sort of, backup type of pick after we lost some of our main targets there.
And that there pick, we got into there was kind of a dead area in the way I was ranking players. And this, like, if we look at what's gone after as well, Shawn mentioned the idea of a kicker or defense, and it kind of felt like we were almost in that zone, but it feels like it's, 3 rounds earlier than I want to be in that zone. So it was just difficult. I think was the best pick in a difficult situation.
Yeah, I think that he has a realistic shot of being a team starter, and I don't think he'll get much passing game work with Thompson there, and that not being a huge part of his skill set in college. But I don't know. That just seems like a good price for a guy where it's totally within the range of outcomes that he's ends up being their starter by week 3 or something.
Yeah.
Colm, how are you feeling about this team so far?
It's pretty good. There's probably more running backs in it than I probably anticipated at this point, but I'm pretty happy actually with the actual running backs that we have got. Like there's if you're just even comparing it to that draft a couple of weeks ago that me and Shawn did in the main event, like AJ Dillon went much earlier. I was actually tempted to push him in round 11 as the option for us, and he made it all the way back as well. So overall, couldn't really be much happier with the wide receivers. We got the guys that, like, before the draft we specifically would have went for, and Shenault, Kirk, and then the 4 wide receivers that we started off with to get Slitten, and there's nice value too. And I think like it's pretty standard for what we're trying to target in the drafts when we have that top 4 pick is the running back, then the tight end, and then fill up with the wide receivers. And to get Kyler Murray as well, somebody who I haven't taken quarterbacks really as early as we have in this offseason. So I'm happy to get one of those guys that is just he's going to be a high scoring quarterback. He's also going to be a lot of fun to watch. So I'm excited for that as well.
I know Shawn, Colm had mentioned earlier, kind of floating the idea of would we take a look at a second quarterback here. Definitely a couple interesting names. Also potential secondary stacking candidates with some of the wide receivers we took early. How do you think about a second quarterback based on our team construction so far?
I think I would probably wait. It's so tempting to add these guys who do look interesting. Blair and I took Burrow in our draft because we had Watson. And so if he has a bad game on Thursday, then, or even just a decent game, I think we would be tempted to really go for it and throw Burrow in there and just see what happens. The other pick here, and I was going to say that we probably can keep waiting because his ADP is actually dropped in the 19th or 20th round. But in terms of, again, kind of getting that exposure to a team, I think the Arizona Cardinals running game is going to score an absurd number of points. And yet, it's hard to pay for Kenyon Drake. Chase Edmonds, someone we very easily could have drafted in this particular draft. But again, there are so many guys I like there. Benjamin is someone I want on every single roster, even though you're probably just going to cut him. It probably won't matter. But unfortunately, he has gone here in the middle of round 16.
Yeah, and this guy really might be Blair. He takes Lindsey and Eno.
It definitely has a Rotoviz.
I think he's gone through that 2020 ultimate draft plan that you posted during over the weekend, Shawn. I think he's just gone down through that and picking off the players.
You did this to yourself, Shawn. I blame you.
Shawn, I want to do this again next year, but can we do it at or before you post that draft plan, please?
All right, guys, we gotta mobilize quickly. We have 60 seconds here. We are on the clock. Let's hear some takes.
Well, this is a guy that your private player here is someone I was all over last year, and it really backfired. One of the reasons why I liked some other guys this season for that. But now the Raiders really look like they're going right back to Jalen Richard as someone who will play an important role in their offense. Yeah,
that's who, as Shawn mentioned, I floated. To me, there's real concern with Theo Riddick, with Lynn Bowden being a guy we were hyped on. And now it seems like Jalen Richard, again, it's the same thing with the Derrick Henry versus Darrington Evans. Do you think they're going to give Jacobs 30 touches a game? I don't. They go to the pass catcher in negative game scripts, and now it seems like it's going to be Richard. And so I like locking in some of those cheap PPR points here, especially if we don't have a ton of pass catching floor in our other running backs.
I like as well what I mentioned about Waller earlier being a good value at his ADP now. I think the same kind of can apply for Richard because, there's going to be passes to go around. I think I also mentioned it on our show that we recorded earlier. I think the Raiders are going to be playing from behind a good bit this year. I don't think they're going to be very good. So I think that filters into Richard's game script as well.
Now, Shawn, when you're thinking about the banking, the points here, first of all, is Casey still on the board? I think they are. So if they play, obviously they have a great game. You start them. If they don't, are you then churning one of your last waiver spots on the Friday waiver to grab another defense? Is that kind of how you're thinking about it?
Well, I think one of the things, and I may be wrong about this, but that Wednesday waivers is what we have to do to set up. And so, you end up using a lot of roster spots. Now, the very late round picks, you're almost certainly going to be going back out of them anyway into the next couple of weeks. In some cases, it's easier to make those moves that you need to make if you're just cutting a kicker or a defense, as opposed to someone you were on all off season and you're then sort of pushed to hold too long. At the same time, Chark was someone that was in the reverse draft last year as the key 17th round pick, but didn't end up getting him late, in part because looking at some of these things with maximizing that first Thursday game. So it can work both ways. I mean, you certainly wouldn't want to lose a DJ Chark because you are dedicating some extra roster resources to try and win week one. But with an 11-week season and just the absolute necessity, obviously, of making it and being good enough, early enough, winning those games, getting into the playoffs, it's just an interesting choice to be considering.
I just want to float some names before we potentially start moving over to that in that direction. Miles Boykin, Andy Isabella, and Gerald Everett, I think, are all pretty interesting here.
I was going to just mention Everett. I also don't mind the Isabella line of thought. Everett does go one pick before us. So, Shawn, do you have any thoughts on Boykin, Isabella? I know, Colm, you just put a guy in here as well.
The one I put in, I'd probably be waiting on another round or so. But
Shawn, Isabella, Boykin, either of those guys interesting to you?
With Isabella, it's just obviously we have Murray, but we also have Kirk. It just depends if we want to get that heavily invested in the Cardinals.
I think putting Isabella with Kirk is maybe more interesting than going the Baltimore area. Pat, did you have something on Boykin that you would like to go with here?
He's just been a guy that I've been investing in pretty heavily, given the available targets. The rookie's not really showing all that well in Baltimore, and his athletic profile being extremely exciting. So I guess with Andrews and not having Lamar, maybe it would make more sense to go with Isabella having Murray as well.
I'm okay to go either way on this one.
Okay. I kind of like we did get Isabella, which I kind of like that. In the same way, I guess we have Andrew, so we could say we're continuing to make a bet on the Ravens offense, but we're more invested in Kyler and this Cardinals offense with that. So I don't mind taking a shot there at Isabella, and with the same, I think they're probably pretty similar, right? From like a probability hitting standpoint, Boykin and Isabella.
I think so. I mean, Isabella is a better prospect, but just tough to see how the targets are going to break out. It's very ambiguous there.
All right, so we're going to have to start brushing off our kicker and defensive takes here coming up.
I'm learning from you too, Peter. I didn't want to mention that other guy in case he goes in the next round.
I know. I think
he's usually going on. He's usually going undrafted, so I think we should be okay. But there's very positive reports about him over the last couple of weeks, and he is somebody who heading into last season was, pretty highly thought of.
Yeah. I think my only other thing would be, I guess it just comes down to our construction. Obviously, we're using a kicker and D. It frees us up for one more spot. I guess the problem is are there any other, we could always use more stabs at running back. I just don't know, when our guys like Eno Benjamin are going off the board.
And DJ Dallas, who there's buzz that he could actually have a third down role there. And I think it's been pretty underreported. So AMC just continues to shine here.
Wow. Yeah, he's going hard. Someone did point out earlier, though, he was clearly setting up the stack with Matt Ryan, and he got sniped on it by 2 picks. Settled for Brady with the Julio Ridley. Although, Shawn, didn't was it you and Blair, or was that a Cabin and Beers team that had Julio and Ridley on it?
No, we do. Yeah, we do. We do have Julio and Ridley. So
yeah,
that Falcons offense is going to score so many points. We like both of those guys. We mentioned the Ridley play as just a cheaper way to get exposure there. This really looks like the season where Ridley could make the jump. Some of these guys, like a Julio Jones, it seems like they could play forever at that level, and yet they don't. At the same time, Julio and his price, it just, again, the running back drafting makes some of those guys to where even if you were a little bit worried that at some point Julio might start to decline, the price that you're getting on it is so favorable.
Yeah. As far as kicker and defenses, based on ADP, looks like KC is one of the top guys. Is that still where you guys are leaning? I know Pat and I have drafted Indy in this spot a couple of times, and we could also make a case for a kicker first as well. I
like KC as a defense, for this season. That's who we took in the main event, but there's a couple of if they're gone before it gets us, I'm not that pushed either. It's one of my least favorite things, obviously, about drafting is the kicker and defense. But I think just we'll see who's there, depending on if it's a kicker that we would go with, or otherwise we can pass and leave it another round.
Well, we were really bashed on our defensive selection in the last draft, and so Pete, do we have anybody in the draft who is going to feel like we lost the draft here with our defensive selection?
Wait, you got to remind me on this. I've done too many drafts. What do we get bashed on?
I believe selecting the Colts over the Chargers in the 19th round.
Okay, man, it's all a blur to me at this point. Pat, do you recall that?
Not really, and I prefer the Colts to the Chargers, so we can get bashed again.
Yeah, I guess. Do you guys have a lean as far as kicker versus defense here?
It sounds like Chiefs needs to play.
Yeah, if the Chiefs were there, I would take them over a kicker.
Okay.
And the
We
only
do have,
preference go ahead.
Well, at kicker, if Casey's gone, I think I have some desire to go with Young Ho Koo.
He just went.
Oh,
You're gonna.
that hurts. Oh, he went to AMC, dude. He went to AMC.
Wow.
AMC might be in the comments here.
Yeah. I actually get the vibe. I think there's maybe one person watching. I get the vibe that AMC just has his Rotoviz articles pulled up. I don't think he's actually in here watching.
Koo is pretty suspicious, dude.
I guess Koo is a little suspicious.
Yeah.
I think we should get the Chiefs defense unless he wants to double up Rams and Chiefs defense, which doesn't seem like he would do, but never know.
I like the Chiefs defense here a lot.
Now you are on the clock.
All right. So we get the Chiefs defense. We'll go ahead and do that. And
when it comes to kickers, then do you have any preferences over how you? The only thing I tend to try and target is unless it's the Broncos and you're in Mile High, I try and take a indoor somebody who plays majority of their games indoor. Have you used any preference for picking kickers?
Not really, because I feel like we're going to end up dropping this person for someone else along the way. So
probably
we can, if the weather turns, we can move to an indoor guy later on. Probably. I just want a high scoring offense to start the year.
Yeah, let's see here. Someone in the chat mentions Prater. Let's see here. We got a couple of kickers who had been released recently. Suck up Prater. Is Prater on the Lions still?
I believe so.
He is, yeah.
Jake Elliott I select when I have to select a kicker.
I don't always select kickers, but when I do, it's Jake Elliott.
Unless if there's somebody here that we're interested in the 19th round and leave the kicker then to the 20th.
Well, we obviously don't need him, but Pat, are you still intrigued by adding Boykin?
I am still intrigued by adding Boykin. Yeah, I don't see any real running back options that are that exciting. I guess we could, look at a Ryan Nall or something, which we added when we ran out of options in another draft. But I think Boykin's more interesting. This is the thing. Pete and I talk about this idea of taking a peek, and I think Boykin is a classic example, as is Isabella, of seeing how involved they are in week one. And if they're not involved, they're pretty easy cuts. They're not the type of guys that, you're going to want to hold on to all season, where as much as I like, Benjamin, you can imagine looking back at your season and being like, well, we held, Benjamin for 6 weeks and that was a mistake. I don't think that'll happen with Isabella or Boykin.
Yeah, I don't mind it. And I too, we're very highly leveraged on rookie wide receivers through a lot of our drafts. And I don't mind continuing to try to chase some of these really cheap second-year breakout guys just with the likelihood. We are on the clock. Dan Arnold goes. So to me, Miles Boykin falling here. I know Colm had a guy he liked. Colm, do you prefer MVS to Boykin, or are you on board with Boykin?
I probably prefer MVS to Boykin, but that's me probably being a little bit biased. I would just be looking at where Lazard has gone in the 12th round. At this time last year, I know it's a whole season, but MVS was well thought of going into the season, and he's obviously dropped away. But there's very positive reports coming out of training camp. That will be my point to that. But if I'm overruled, let's go Boykin.
I think Boykin's a little more interesting, tied to Lamar Jackson, a realistic path to being kind of the third guy in targets there. I think it's a little more murky with Green Bay, and just wondering how much that offense is going to score this year compared to the Ravens kind of pushes me personally to Boykin.
It's okay, let's do it.
But you can rub it in our face with an MVS open.
He was somebody who I do own in Dynasty, and he kind of had fallen away altogether. And but just usually the thing that I don't listen to a lot of stuff that comes out of Green Bay, but when Rodgers starts talking up players in training camp, and that's what we heard last year about Lazard over and over again. Nobody was talking about Lazard, and Rodgers kept bringing up the name, and he's doing the exact same thing this year with MVS, where he's not talking a huge amount about anyone else outside of Devontae Adams, and realistically, there's not a huge tight ends, a big question mark in Green Bay. they have Devontae Adams, they have Aaron Jones, but there's a lot of question marks then around who's the next basically 2 targets after Devontae Adams in terms of target share, and those passes are going to have to go somewhere. So that's just what made me intrigued. And he was somebody who kind of 3 weeks ago was completely off my radar, but I think that he's going on. He'll probably go undrafted in this as well, but I think there is upside there.
That makes a lot of sense.
So we get the exciting pick now to finish it off in the kicker stakes.
Well, Jake Elliott's gone, so I'm out of options and ideas. Although we did take, what was it, Tyler Bass? Pete, I know he's a kicker.
That's the level. I know he plays the position we need. That feels like a victory at this point.
I mentioned about Denver and kickers that play at Mile High. So Brandon McManus is still there. I always think that, and I talked about this with Shawn as well. I think that they're an offense who may do very well moving the ball between kind of the 20s, but they may get stuck continuously without getting into the red zone or into the end zone. And I think that makes them an interesting candidate for a lot of field goals.
To me, whoever just can muster even just the faintest kicker take, I think they win out here. So, I mean, you just sold me on McManus pretty hard.
I'm 100% in on McManus. I'm going to be so mad if we get sniped.
In my head, I'm just picturing him Monday Night Football. Cortland Sutton and A.J. Brown have already combined for 300 yards, and then McManus is just drilling 60-yarders through that thin Colorado air.
But they can, if they're getting up to 150 yards each, it could just be that they're getting catching a huge amount of passes for 20 yards each time.
Oh, there goes McManus.
Oh, come on.
Could you imagine if it was AMC that took him? That would have been so fun.
Well, someone in the comments here said it was Gretsch, and I believe it. Yeah, there you go.
It's under his pseudonym. I could see it here.
We'll have to cut a deal to split the teams.
So, Colm, can you muster another kicker take after your boy McManus?
I'm all out of kicker takes now. We need anyone playing indoors here. You didn't seem too high on the Packers offense for scoring points. So Crosby's there. He's usually fairly reliable. But
who's their week 1 matchup?
The Vikings.
Okay. Shawn, any kicker takes?
No, the challenge always with the kickers is just to draft someone who is currently on a team, although you can just swipe them out with that first waivers section.
Next.
I'm fine with Crosby.
Crosby works for me.
Yeah, I think.
Let's do it.
He'll be mine. But I was just going to ask, Peterson's after going there in that last pick, obviously we talked a little bit about Kerryon and Peterson was there and the water's more murky, but surely then that makes Peterson a value at that pick there. I was going to mention him earlier in the draft.
Here's one more
we have a comment here that's saying Blankenship from Jay.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to pull up. They were saying Paulson currently has him ranked 4th. They're playing indoors versus the Jags in week 1. You guys want to are you okay going Blankenship, or I can't muster an opinion on this? Someone said they're at the Jags week 1, so they're not indoors, but it is an outdoor warm weather matchup.
I was going to say, too, that once we get going here, last year Stefan did a fantastic streaming kicker article. And so I'm going to have some more strong feelings as we go along and try to make week to week, make sure we match up with the best, highest scoring kicker opportunities as we go through the season. Obviously, those will just be $1 bids as we move through. But if you are looking for some kicker advice, Stefan really nailed those last year.
There you go.
I'll go with Blankenship then.
I already took.
Oh, you're on Crosby. No worries. Just playing for that week 1 matchup was my thought.
Blankenship's an unusual. That's an unusual name. Blankenship.
Sounds like a character on Mad Men or something, right? All right, guys. So
that qualifies as a hot take for kickers.
I want to do a quick recap of this team, and maybe there was a question here that I thought might be fun to tie in as we recap this. Other than Chenault, who are each of your must walk away from every draft with this guy, guys? So Let's go around the horn here. Let's start with Colm. How you feel about this team and your must walk away with guy?
Well, I mentioned through the team in general already, so I'll not spend too much time on it. I think the guy at the minute that must draft is probably DJ Moore at that point. And I think we're all in unison there. And the other one's Cortland Sutton. I like to try and get those two guys every draft if I can. It's actually happening most of the time because they continue to be undervalued.
Yep. Shawn, how you feeling about this squad? Who's your guy?
Yeah, love the team. I think that especially in the FFPC, the single elite running back approach really gets you off to the perfect start. You have that league winner at running back, and then you can really hammer the wide receivers that you want there. Sutton, someone definitely the real amazing pick, I think, from this draft, from an ADP perspective, being able to put A.J. Brown with a slightly different team. We've joked about how, we're drafting the same team over and over. Having Brown with this team as opposed to one of the teams that we normally draft in that 10, 11, 12 range, I think that's a lot of fun. In terms of the must-draft guy, when you're going with this format and this start, Mark Andrews, Pat said it seems impossible to think that he would bust. I would second that. We hope that volume can increase. We talk a lot about Andrews being an efficiency guy. That can obviously bounce around a little bit season to season, but with this Ravens offense, you expect them to be very, very explosive. If Mark Andrews actually emerges a little bit, though, with his volume, then you're talking about him being really the pick that sets everything up. So I think Mark Andrews in this format may be that guy where, you must come out of the draft with him. And that's why, I didn't push harder for Hopkins, who I also think there in that range, is a great pick.
Pat, what's the take?
Yeah, I completely agree with the point about Andrews. Just sets you up so well structurally, especially since we know we're not going to be hammering running back early on. So it gives you that extra roster spot that you don't have to spend two on tight end. Sutton is a guy, he's my highest owned player in best ball. So agree with Colm on that one. And then Boykin is a guy that I'm glad you guys let me talk us into there, because just it's like available targets and athleticism. And I wonder if we had gotten preseason, if we'd be really excited about what he can do in that offense. And then, I was just happy to see that Colm is such a Rojo stan in this draft.
Colm providing Pat some nice cover to say that it was Colm who took him there.
Because I made the case for Herndon. It was, but I really couldn't have asked for anything better than that.
I obviously like this team. I really like when we're able to build out really high firepower starting lineups. I think in previous years, sometimes reaching for those QBs can feel a little gross, but the way these drafts have kind of fallen, and you get guys like Kyler and Deshaun Watson as really good values with also really high firepower starting lineup combinations. I really like. Obviously, the same goes for Mark Andrews. No one can question our wide receiver firepower. I will say my one takeaway that I mentioned earlier, feeling like we are getting squeezed a little bit on some of our preferred zero running back targets. Some of that is as the ADPs get more efficient because of news and information in training camp. Part of that is when we have other Rotoviz subscribers in the draft with us. So I don't love maybe our running back core as much as I do some of the other teams, but it's also fun to get some different exposures to guys like a Zigbo and Jalen Richard that I don't have on other teams that might have a little juice. So overall, love the construction. Think we are ready to go to war with this team. This was super fun, guys. Thank you guys for suggesting this idea. We had a blast.
It was awesome. Pete, for people who are drafting, and there are a ton of great main event opportunities. You really, I think the winning team in the main event will be drafted the next couple of days. Talking about those running backs and not really getting our guys, and looking at us taking Daryl Williams there in the 11th. Do you have, and Colm and Pat as well, tips for drafters on how they should proceed now if they want to make sure they're getting Snell, Evans, Hines, some of those guys?
It does seem like, especially if you have a true zero RB build like AMC, you do have to be aggressive. It can be tempting to get anchored to ADP. I find myself doing this in best ball drafts all the time. I'm always trying to get the value. But if your build is driving you in that direction, I like how AMC kind of attacked this draft, even if he was grabbing guys maybe one round ahead of what we would otherwise do. So that would just be my advice, is make sure you're aggressive to where you're not just trying to get value and your guys at the same time, because it's hard to have your cake and eat it too at this stage of the drafting game.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I mentioned it a few times. The people that we were taking, between the 15th and 17th round at running back, all in this draft have gone in the kind of 11 to 13 range. They've all been pushed up by 2-3 rounds each. So you really do need to take your shots on the guys you really want if you're taking that approach.
Yeah, I think in this part of the draft, ADP can pretty much be thrown out the window. You're really looking for the guys who fit the right profiles and trying to get as many of them on your team, and maybe tie breaking between those with the likelihood that the other guy could fall back to you. I do think there's some picks that, like the Darrington Evans pick, I've seen him go much later than this recently. So surprised a little bit to see him in the 13th, although I think that's a good pick there. And then I also think you can pretty much throw out what AMC did, is his being kind of unless you're literally in the draft with him specifically, I think he was targeting guys that the Rotoviz guys target and we target, but aren't commonly going this high. So I guess I wouldn't try to take too much away from what he did in the draft as being indicative of kind of the general market.
All right, guys. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I do actually have to wrap things up here for another show, but you guys can, if you're listening to this on Ship Chasing, definitely check out the Rotoviz Overtime podcast. Shawn and Colm do great work over there. They'll be coming at you a couple times a week during the season. I mentioned our housekeeping things for Ship Chasing. We'll be here with our weekly Wednesday shows, going to squeeze in one more draft on Friday. I believe that covers everything. If you want the draft plan that AMC just drafted off of, head over to Rotoviz. Colm and Shawn, great Rotoviz work over there. And this has been fun. So for the quad managed team, for Shawn, for Colm, for Pat, this has been Ship Chasing and Rotoviz Overtime.